But of course, we have to always translate it into Bechain. So, Be'ezus Hashem, we should be matzliach, learning it in such a way it comes on L'Poel Mamash. One of the most important things of learning Chassidus is the inyan of being mizboinen and contemplating and thinking how it applies to us in our daily life. And as usual, the share is Lila Nishma Salaschus Miriam Bas Ephraim Za'ev, that should bring immediately the Geula Shlema and Tchias HaMeisim B'Karev Mamash. So in the beginning of the Maimer, the Rebbe addresses in what's Nissim, what's miracles. And the Rebbe says there are two sorts of miracles which is Al Pi Teva, which is in the Levushei HaTeva, and there are such things that are not in Levushei HaTeva, which are L'mayla min HaTeva L'gamri. They are totally supernatural, like let's say Kriyas Yamsuf and such things. The Rebbe says to understand the inyan of Nissim B'chlal, let's understand that when it's Al Pi Teva, it's going through Seder Shtalshlus, goes through the regular Seder of things. When it's Nissim, that means you're coming from a koyach which is higher than Seder Shtalshlus. In order to understand this better, the Rebbe says, let's analyze what's Shtalshlus. So the first thing is Mupsari Erz Elaka. Let's study what's Shtalshlus in a person. And the Rebbe brings from Sefer Yetzirah the pasuk V'har Sinai Oshan Kuloi. Oshan is the Rosh Tevis, Olam Shana Nefesh. Everything is divided up into Olam is space, Shana is time, Nefesh is the Chayas, as the Rebbe says, the Chayas that's put into everything, whether into the worlds or into a person. And the Rebbe said, let's take a look at the Shtalshalus in ourselves. And from that, Olam, Katan, Zeha Adam, a person is like a microcosm, like a small world. So from understanding there, you'll understand how Shtalshalus works in the Olamais, in the higher worlds. So the first thing that Rebbe brings, that when the Chayas enters our body. And that's no doubt, there's Chayas in our body. Our body and our Chayas are two separate things. When it comes into the body, it comes in a way of Hischalkos. It divides itself up in different ways. For example, in the head goes the Seichel. Midas go into the body, into the heart. And then there's the Kaiches. But there is also an inyan, brings the Rebbe in the previous shir that we learned, that in a person, there is sometimes seichel, which really belongs only in the brain, can come down also to the hand. But that's not the real keli for the seichel. The real keli for seichel is your moyach, your brain. But then we see that a hand can write an intellectual thing. How does that happen? Because the seichel is being mislabesh into the hand. And it's maneuvering the fingers according to the batzin of the seichel. So there is seichel in the hand, but not in a way of hislapshus, and not in a way that's bepnimius. It's just passing through in order to bring the message to the hand. That's the inyan of the way it is in the hand. Now we're up to page 8, and the Rebbe is going to take the next step, where seichel sometimes can come into the feet. How does it come to the feet? We're on the top of the page, second line from the top. If a person is using his feet in a seichel-dik way, not just walking A cow can also walk. When a person is using his feet in a seichelic way, as the Rebbe is going to give an example, someone who's dancing with a special kind of movement, where does that come from? It's not the feet can't generate those movements by itself. It comes from the seichel. The seichel is telling right foot go this way, left foot go that way, now turn, now jump. So there is a communication between the brain and the raglayim. But the seichel is mitzumtzum yoiser. It's more contracted than the way it's in the hand. V'hagam sheyesham ha'aras ha'seichel u'k'mei seichel ha'rikud. Even though there is absolutely a ha'ara of the seichel there, like there is in the seichel ha'rikud of dancing, the seichel zeh mitzumtzum b'yoiser. It is obviously very mitzumtzum, very limited how much seichel is going into the foot to direct the dancing. But on the other hand, it's still seichel. You could still, it's still considered in the level of seichel. Why? The person is being very careful to be mechaven, to direct the movement of his feet according to the beat and the rhythm and the tnuos of the music. Where does that stem from? Where does the music, the nigun come from? Nigun who? Mipnimiyus hakavana shebemoichen. Person has in his moichen, he has pnimiyus hakavana of that nigun. He's singing a certain nigun, let's say up Kazakh, and his brain is telling him, now you have to move the feet this way, move the feet that way. So it's based on the pnimiyus hakavana of the person's brain. And the Rebbe is going to give us now an example from the Beis HaMikdash. There's such a thing as being lechaven b'shir. Nicht stam singen a nigun. You know, sometimes person stam sings a nigun. In Sefer Nigunim, there are many sichas in the introduction, tells us about how to appreciate a nigun. And tells us that there's a nigun mechuvan, and a nigun that the Rabbeim, a nigun miyuchas that the Rabbeim made, or that they accepted. And then the Rebbe says there's also a nigun shoita. Stama, a foolish thing. It says nothing, it has nothing. That's why we have to be careful with nigun. It says that writing, when you write, it's kolmas halev. It's the quill of the heart. When you sing, it's kolmas hanefesh. Your neshama is expressing itself. It's like the quill of the soul. That's why we have to be very careful in nigunim, and not just nigunim that we sing, nigunim that we listen to, nigunim that we play in the house. They should have teichen, should have meaning. It should awaken a feeling of simcha, bitachon, tshuva, whatever it is. But it should be l'shem shemayim. It should be for a good purpose. So where does nigun come from? Nigun stems, if the person is doing it right, obviously, he's thinking about it, and it comes from pnimiyas ha-moichin. Then he brings in the Leviim, sheyodim lechaven b'shir. They're able to direct their minds with this shir. Shashir shalahem haya v'fi oifen kavanas ha-moichin. According to the kavana of their moichin. Shu kavana pnimis shebemoyach which is the kavana pnimis of the brain in that askala that they're thinking about. I think it's in Hayom Yom, I'm almost sure, that says that the Tzemach Tzedek used to learn with niggin. And from the kind of niggin he's singing, you were able to tell which sugya, which subject is he learning. Is he learning Gemara, learning Medrash? You were able to tell. Because the niggin is supposed to be a reflection. There is a vart, it's printed in the Isafis of Shulchan Aruch from Alter Rebbe, I think in Shabbos. The vart is, they asked the Rebbe Maharash, I think it was the Rebbe Maharash or the Rebbe Rashab, why doesn't Chabad have Zmiris in the Siddur? Why didn't Alter Rebbe put Zmiris? And it says that because the Tzemach Tzedek answered that the Alter Rebbe relied on the Chazaka that Lubavitchers will sing Zmiris anyway. They will sing anyhow by the table. So we don't have to put into the Siddur. The Rebbe Maharash added that, I don't remember exactly the Lashon, but the Nukuda was, I think he quoted from the Tzemach Tzedek also. I'm sorry for not being clear at this, but it's printed in the back of the Shulchan Aruch. He says, Zmiros darf sich singen. Ob sie singt sich, it das gesungen. Ob das ein Mensch wie gesungen, it das nicht gesungen. I'll translate. Zmiros is something that has to be expressed by itself. It has to come out naturally. Not that I open up my siddur and I start singing, but rather it has to be something, a very deep response of our own nefesh. We get nisayrer, so we want to sing. That's called zingtzach. Not that I'm singing, but I am automatically singing. It's coming out like natural. So as long as it's zingtzach, then it's a niggin. But if it's only because I read it out of a siddur, it's not zmiris. In other words, nigun is very, very deep, very, very sublime, very important. And that's why I have to be careful what kids listen to and adults. Befrat says a person puts his nefesh into nigun. And since you're putting your nefesh into it, the people who are composers, we should be selective. What kind of composer is this? Is he singing? He found the pasuk in Shir HaShirim or in Siddur and puts a nigun to it to make it lebedik. You know, anything to make lebedik is worthwhile, of course. I'm not saying chas v'shalom that nigunim from certain composers shouldn't be heard. My father told me that the Frierdiker Rebbe was once walking by a bar where they drink, and he hears a lot of music and dancing and singing. Frierdiker Rebbe said, "A bissel zeitlach, aber freilach." It might be a little bit on the side, like not on our road, but it's freilach, it's happy. So of course, that's also something to take in consideration. The Nekuda, what we're trying to bring out here, that in the Beis HaMikdash, the Leviim, when they sang, it's something that came out from their nefesh, from their hisbainanus, from their pnimis hamoichin. Then the Rebbe brings his own, the Frierdiker Rebbe brings his comment, Omar HaKosev, Ayim HaShkosev Divim Matzcha Kamet Tzescha Samach Gimel, Be'inyan, over there it talks about Koil Ma'orer HaKavana. There's a saying, Koil awakens your Kavana. You could say the opposite. First have the Kavana, and then have the Koil, like we're just talking till now. So he said, there's also in your Koil Ma'orer HaKavana. Oh, if Koil Ma'orer HaKavana, so let me just start singing. The Kavana will come. So he says, Dafka Pnimius HaKavana. If you want to reach Pnimius HaKavana, so you need koil. That's why it says a person should daven b'koil, will help him to be able to concentrate more. It's a very important. Alter Rebbe writes in the Geras HaKodesh in Kuntres that when a person davens, should not be davening balachash or chaytfim. Balachash means silently. We have to use voice. We must use our vocal cords. If we don't use our vocal cords, then that's called lachash. And by the way, this is something I teach children in yeshiva. There are several letters of the Aleph Beis that are impossible to pronounce begashmias if you don't have your vocal cords. You can try it out yourself. Vez, Gimel, Dalid, Zion. Try a vase to whisper it. It's going to come out like a fey, like the letter fey. Try Gimel. If you whisper it, it's going to sound like a kuf. Dalid is going to sound like a tes. Zion is going to sound like a samach. Try to say Zion whispering. You'll see it's impossible. You need to have vocal cords. That's just a side note. Kol panim, so we need koil, and koil is ma'ira kavana. Then the Rebbe brings further. Lahayir b'inyan alaviyim. This is from the Frierdiker Rebbe's comment. And as I mentioned earlier, the comments that the Frierdiker Rebbe put in, the Hagais, are very, very concise, just like pointers to ideas. So we're not going to learn it ba'arichos. B'inyan alaviyim shaveidosem b'shir. The Levim, what is their avodah b'shir? It says, it explains umadrega ba'atika, madrega of shir of the Levim, a Levi is in a level of atik. There's a pasuk. It says va'avad alevi hu. It says the Zohar. What does it mean? Do atika. The Levi is in the madrega of atik. V'zo pnimius hakavana. Weiter. Kishir hu b'chinas makif. What is shir? Niggin is something which is l'mayla min haseichel, l'mayla min havana. It's higher. It's higher than being able to grasp it. Shanigun mishtalshel. We see the nature of a niggin is mishtalshel. Shalach hasoifai maschil tchilasei. You finish a niggin, you go back to the beginning again, like in a circle. Why? Because that's what a shir is. Shir is something makif, which you bring down into a pnimius. You reveal it through niggin. V'chein al pi pashut, the Rebbe brings us a dogma from Mishnayos. Mashenema b'Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Shabbos, Pedikei, right at the beginning, talks about animals and whether an animal is allowed to go out on Shabbos with the nose ring or the leash. Like a dog has a leash, animals also have like certain things that they put on, round object like a ring. It's called a sheir. It says in the Mishnah, Kol Baalei Hasher, all those who wear a leash or a ring, Yotzin b'sheir. So on Shabbos they can go out with that leash. What is the leash? How do you this circle that they put the thing they put around the nose of the cow or the animal? How do you tabas ogol? It's a round ring. V'zenikra sheir. And this is called a sheir. V'humadregas makif. When you say a circle, you're saying something that goes around. That's makif. Now getting back to the niggin where it stems from the person's moichin. Moichin is generally the inyan from pnimius. You have to understand what you're learning. What v'hanigan harayam shechasim pnimius hamoichin. The niggin that you're producing is coming out of your pnimius hamoichin. Shumadregas hatainuk shebeseichel. You have such a tainug in your seichel that you're producing naturally a niggin, a zinktzach. This can explain also the meaning of the word, the name Yeshurun, and the name Yisrael. Yidden are called Bnei Yaakov, Yisrael, and Yeshurun. What does it stand for? So he brings Yisrael Shir Kale, has the letters of Shir Kale, Shua Tainuk Shalamayla. This is all bringing out that what's Nigun? Nigun is an expression of Pnimis HaMeichen. Now when you express it, you have many ways to express it. You can do it quietly and just think it, or you could do it loudly, or you could start jumping and dancing. That's where Rikud comes in. Rikud. Well, if you nigun, the dancing is according to the kind of nigun that you're singing. Sheberikud mechaven kefi kavanas hatnuais usdara mamash. With the rikud, you're directing your feet mamash, the movements according to the movements of the nigun and the seder of the nigun. You know, when they make different kind of nigunim, people dance a certain thing. They prepare this in advance. That means they practice with the tunes, and they know by each tune what to do, different kind of movements. That's how he dances. And where does it all stem from? Nigun hu tainug haseichel. It's tainug haseichel. So it's a very pneumistic thing. It's not a simple thing. I once heard from Rabbi Khan a geschmack of art about this, but that will leave, if I don't forget, we'll leave it to the end because it could take up some time. So since Nigun is Tainug HaSeichel, it's such a deep thing, so maybe it has the what's going into the feet, to direct the feet, is from a very high level of Seichel, l'cha'ira. Mikol Makaim, says the Rebbe, Oira Seichel, Sheher Ba'araglayim, Humitzumtzim B'yoised. Nevertheless, the Oira Seichel that's in the Raglayim and the feet, it's extremely limited, extremely mitzumtzam. B'seif kol seif, hurak harikud. Saf kol saf, it's only a rikud. It's no big seichel going on there. You can find sometimes the big Talmud Chacham doesn't know how to dance. Then you can find someone who's a very, regular person, not too much seichel, but he has the kunst of dancing. So it comes from Pnimis HaMeichen, but it's still so minute and so little and so contracted that's the inyan. What the Rebbe is bringing now, that seichel comes down to the regel also. So we see that there's such a thing as ishtalshlus by a person. The seichel of his nefesh goes to his head, and the chushim. There is a seichel that can come down to the hand when he writes, and there is an amount of seichel that comes down to the feet. So in other words, there is ishtalshlus, there is an oir that comes from a higher level down to a lower, which the Rebbe Rashab is soon going to translate that there's an oir and atzilus, and then the oir of atzilus is divided up into 10 spheres. Where does it come down to? It comes down to Bria, Yetzira, Asiya Ruchni, Asiya Gashmi. It comes down from Atzilus. But what comes down from Atzilus? Not the oil itself. It's too high. Then what does come down? A ha'ara of, let's say, Bina goes to Bria. Ha'ara of the Midas goes to Yetzira. A ha'ara of Malchus goes to Asiya, as we're going to explain later. The same idea, same concept, like seichel coming down to the hand or to the feet, it's only a ha'ara. Now, as a further explaining the inyan of Raglayim, so the Rebbe is going to add one more thing here. That sometimes we can find that a regel can have an advantage over the moyach, over the head. Where do we find this? ומה שלפעמים יש מעלה ברגל על הראש, מה שנוי סייס הראש מליחי, אם חייס חפצוי, וזה הרגל נקרא ראש. There is such a thing that if a person wants to walk somewhere, so his brain tells him, you walk from this street to the next street. But how does he get there? Who takes him there? The regel. So the regel, it becomes his leader. It's called a rosh, because he has the advantage over it that he's able to carry the head and lead him to where he wants to go. And in that case, so this regel now is higher in a level than the head. The head can't get anywhere. The regel brings him there. Says the Rebbe, yes, that's true. Certain point, certain inyanim, the regel has a maila, but on the other side, on the other hand, achal yedei seder ishtalshlus, ein sham haras hasechel. If you're going to look, however, quantitatively, how much seichel goes into the foot, there is ein sham haras hasechel. There is no ha'ara of the seichel, even though the Rebbe said before there is haras hasechel, but that was by rikud. Over here, you don't need haras hasechel. Over here, you just have the ratzin to walk. Just has to train his feet and direct it where to walk. Parentheses. This depends on the movement of the Eivarim. So it's understood from this that there are myriads, plenty and plenty of madregas of this hishtalshlus that's by a person. Now we did the head, we did the hands, we did the feet. Where do we go next? Next we go to the nimshal. What's the nimshal? Like this mashal, we can now look upwards to the oil masil yainim. And the Rebbe says, Eina kavana al oilam ha'atzilos, ki im ba'olam is biyachulu. We're not going to, in the nimshal, we're not going to talk about oilam ha'atzilos receiving from higher, a ha'ara. We're going to talk about biyah, bria, yetzira, asiya. Sheyesham hischalkos ha'madregas. The oil masil yainim have hischalkos ha'madregas. Now, if we can see the chart, that will be helpful. That branches out what we have. Beautiful. So, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya Ruchni, Siya Gashmi. The level of Atzilus is Keneged Yud from Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is Chachma. And it's called Abba. Abba. There's Abba and Ema. So Atzilus is called Abba Ilah, the supernal Abba. And that's the level of Chachma. Over there is Kulei Toiv, La Yigur Chara. There's only good, and there's no Ra at all in Atzilus. Then comes Bria. Bria is letter Hey of Hashem's name. That's the Bina. And the Lashon that's used, that in Bria is Kursaya. What is Kursaya? Ema Ilah Mekanana Bekursaya. The heavenly mother dwells in its nest, in its seat, in its kisei. That's why Bria is called Olam HaKisei. Like a kursai is a special seat. What's in Bria? The Srafim. We know that every day we daven because Krishma talk about the Srafim, the Chayes, the Fanei HaKodesh. So Yeshaya Navi saw the Merkava, and he saw it in a very high level of Bria, Srafim. That's the level of Srafim. What's in Olam HaBria? Ruboy Toiv. Most of over there is Toiv. That means whether it's 51% or 99%, what's Ruboy Toiv. But since it's already Bria, it's already a creation, it's in a gather of Ra, of the opposite of good. It's not that there is Mamish Ra, but it's called Rubei Toiv and Miut Ra. Then comes Yetzira, the Vav of Shem Avaya, which represent the Shisha Midos. Those Shisha Midos are in Yetzira, and over there are the Malachim called Chayas, that Yecheskel HaNavi saw. Then comes the next part, that what level of good is there? Machza al machza, 50-50. There is half good and half ra, but the ra does not mix with the good. They're two separate and distinct things. Then comes Asiya Haruchni, which is the level of Malchus, Heach Roina. Over there is the level of Oifanim. There's a Lashon, Oifan Ba'asiya. That in Asiya is the Madrega of Oifanim. Over there is Rubai Ra, and the Ra has Shaykhs El HaToiv. It has a connection to the Toiv. It's not mixed fully, but it has a Shaykhs to Ra. Then comes Olam Asiya Gashmi, which is Rubai Kulei Ra, like the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Vav and Tanya. Ra, and over there the Ra is Misarev Ima Toiv. There's Taruves Toiv Vara. So what do we see here? We have each Olam has its inyan. Now where does Bria get the Bina from? We say it's Bina. Where is it coming from? It's coming from Atzilus. In other words, Bina of Atzilus. Bina of Atzilus itself can't come down to Bria. It's too powerful. But a Ha'ara of the Bina of Atzilus shines into Bria. Then the Shisha Midos of Atzilus shines into Yetzira. But it's a ray. And the same thing with Malchus. And that's what the Rebbe is going to talk about now. You can say, in Atzilus itself, the Esespheres are shining mamish the way they are. They're emes and metzias. But when it comes to Bria, Atzilus has to diminish that light. Bina cannot be in that level. It has to be contracted. So Bria does get Bina, but it's only a reflection, a ray of the Bina of Atzilus. Let's look inside. Shesham yesh chalkus hamadreges sharei ema ilah mikanana bekursaya. The heavenly ema, that's Bina. Where is it? Bekursaya no'elam hakisei, which is Bria. Shekoi b'derech klal alelam haBria. What does that mean when you say Bina is an Olam HaBria? Bina means grasping, understanding. Sheklalas hamadregas hem bevechinas hasaga dafka. Dafka in a way of hasaga. Shemasigim es chayusam. The whoever is in Bria, like we said earlier, the Srafim are in Bria, they grasp their chayus. They grasp it because they're in a world of Bina. In Isbar La'el, when we say grasping, it doesn't necessarily mean that you understand the mehus We talked earlier about the difference between knowing the metzius of the thing, the existence, or knowing the mahus. And it's bar lael, the kol asago rak yedias hametzius. We already learned earlier that when we say hasaga, bina, it's only the metzius. We don't know the mahus. But what do we get there? We call makoim harei bebriya ha'ira leki bevichinis islapshus davka. But still, what do we get in bria? Ha'ira leki of atzilos, which is from bina, and it comes down into bria that we should be able to have hasaga. What about the other worlds? What do they do when if bina of atzilus would shine into Yetzira and Asiya? Masha'en can be Yetzira. Ha'ed the bria hurak b'derech ma'ivir. When you go down to the next world, so the light which is able to be absorbed in bria cannot be absorbed in Yetzira, which is a lower world. It doesn't come down to Yetzira in a way of Islapshus. Into Bria it could, because it's measured Dafka for Elam Bria. But it can't go lower. So what does Yetzira get? Does he get anything? The Eir Eliki, which is Shaykh v'Yetzira, who bevechinas his slapshus v'Yetzira. That Eir of Atzilus, the Shisha Midas, which is Shaykh for Yetzira, because Yetzira is Eilam HaMidas. So therefore, over there, it could come down into Yetzira in a way of his slapshus, sharishis fira mekanen of Yetzira, because you have the 6 spheres that dwell in Yetzira. Of course, it's not on the same level like it was in Atzilus. But what is absorbable in Yetzira? The 6 spheres. And likewise, let's go to the next step to Asiya. The Chazal say, Oifen ba'Asiya. The Oifanim are in the level of Asiya. That's the lowest level. Which means that also in Atzilus, also in Asiya, there's an Oir Eliki. Gam ba'Asiya, Ha'oir Eliki ha'meir sham. Hu bevichinis hislapshus dafka chulu. There is some hislapshus of Oir Eliki in Asiya too. But what? The lowest level of Oifan, which, if I'm correct, it's the level of Malchus. Masha'en kain, Chabad de Bria. What about the Chabad of Bria? That means Bria, every Oilam has, this is for sure, when we say that, let's say Bria has Bina, it's not limiting it to exclusively to Bria, to Bina. It has Chachma, Bina, Das. Every world has 10 spheres, has all 10 of them. But what is the emphasis there? What's Begolui there? And what's being absorbed there? That each world, depending which world it is. If it's Bria, it's Bina. If it's Yetzira, it's the Midas. If it's Asiya, it's Malchus. Now, the Chabad of Bria, when it shines into the next world, because every world naturally shines through Ishtalshus, goes to the next world. What happens to Chabad of Bria when it comes to Yetzira and Asiya? Yetzira can only handle Midas. Asiya can only handle Malchus. So what happens to the Moichin of Bria that shines into Yetzira? So he says, I will be Chabad de Bria who be Yetzira v'Asiya rak b'derech ma'ivir. It only superficially passes through it. It doesn't go in the way of its lapshus. Aval b'Bria. But what's about the essence treatise that are in Bria itself? Who b'v'chinas islapshus. It could come into Bria in the way of islapshus, even though the ikir is bina, but the Chabad in general can also be there in a level of islapshus. And the Rebbe brings a raya. Ki atayra sheila ma'aliyah said, Taira, which is even higher than Bria, Taira is Raisa Mechachman Afkes, comes from Mechachman Atzilus. Mikol Malkeim, Babi Islapshus. It does come down by Islapshus. Vezeh Tzrichen Leida. And this we must know. Kimashem is Bayer Bozeh. The Ema Yilah, when we talk about Ema Yilah being Mizgala in Bria, Eina Kavan al Etzem Madregas Habina. Bina, when it comes down from Atzilus to Bria, it's not the etzem of Bina of Atzilus. The Bina of Atzilus itself stays in its place. It can't come down. It's only a ha'ara. Kim al madreges hamalchus da Atzilus k'moishe mislabeshes be'esed svidas de Bria chulu. There is a lashon, as the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to quote in his comment, Malchus da Atzilus nase atik v'keser la'olam abriya. That's a lashon brought in Chassidus. That the Malchus of Atzilus is going to shine into Bria and shine everything Malchus got. Malchus receives everything, but it can't give over everything to somewhere where it's not a keli for it. So it comes down to Bria, but it comes down the way Malchus Atzilus. Let's look inside. The Amar HaKosev, L'Hoir, Malchus Atzilus, Keser V'Atik L'Bria. It becomes the Keser for Bria, just like Atzilus has a Keser on top of it. So too, what's a Keser? Higher than Chachma. So too, Malchus of Atzilus is higher than Chachma of Bria. So it becomes the Keser and Atik La'olam HaBria. Chulu. Ba'yidei Slapshus Malchus Atzilus, the Malchus de Bria. What happens through the Slapshus of Malchus Atzilus coming down to Malchus de Bria? What takes place? This brings about the creation of all the Nivraim of Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. We're going through a lot of Haskalah stuff here, and it's important to mention that even though there's not so much practical things that he's bringing in Avodas HaAdam, but later on in the Maimer, we're going to talk about many Geshmaka and Yanim, which are based on this. So knowing this now will help us understand it later. So here it's just telling us the idea of the Ishtalshalus. That Ishtalshalus means one world shines into the next, and each world is going to take what it can get. Madrega zu, hariyuvadai bevchinas islapshus davka bibria. Once it comes to Malchus de Bria, and it creates all the Nivraim of Bria, then he says, this oid is Islapshus, Dafka Bibria, Shari Afilo Halachais, Shein Mahus Chachmas Yitzani Isparech, that even Halachais, which we're talking about the highest level of Chachma, it also could come down to Bria. Isi Bigeres HaKodesh, Diva Maschalav and Mashkosebe Prietz Chaim Cholu, Shein Derech Islapshus Habria, Umay Vira Yitzira Cholu. It comes down by Islapshus into Bina, into Bria, because there it's Eilam HaSaga, Bina. And then it goes Maivir, so superficially, a little bit light, into Yitzira. That you're saying that Ema Ilah, which is Bina of Atzilus, surely it comes down the way it's portioned and set aside for Bria, it surely can be accepted in Bria in the way of Hislapshus. He's saying Kol Shekain. And the Rebbe said, Omar HaKosev, what's the Kol Shekain, the certainty? Vadoi Zu Yuvan, the Fishi Yadua. How do you know come down mamish in a pnimistic way in Bria? It's simple. Shekol Dava Shu Nimshach Ala Prat. How do you shaykh le prat zed afka chulu? If you have something which is being drawn to a certain prat, surely there is some common denominator, some connection. So therefore, anything that's your megala to the prat, that's why it has to be bislapshus. Because he's being revealed into bria, so surely b'pnimius, the klal hu makif upratu pnimi. The general thing is, we know that a klal is something that encompasses a lot of things, and a prat is pnimi. As mentioned earlier, these comments are extremely concise and short, so we're not going to go into detail. So what do we get from here? We get a picture of Ishtalshalos. We get a picture of the Seder Ishtalshalos of all the worlds. Now each world is getting how much they can, whether it's Maivid or Slapshus. That's to sum it up. Now the Rebbe is going to say, also in Eilam Asiyah, there's also levels. These differences of Madregas in the Gileadis are not necessarily dafka only in the higher worlds. Even in the world below, there are also different levels. For example, the Gili of Elikus that's shown in the Beis Hamikdash. What was shining there? The highest level of Gili Elikus was there. Like the Chachamim give us the saying, Tzimtzem Shechinasai ben Shnei Badei Ha'arin. Hashem, so to speak, revealed his Shechina. He uses the lashon Tzimtzum, but he said, the Rebbe says it means it was Megala. He brought, because it's actually a Tzimtzum, to bring such a Gili Oyer, the Shechina, to bring it down into a Ben Badei Ha'arin, between the bars of the Arain. That was something which is a very big accomplishment, which Eibshter did. But what came there? Sorry. When it says Tzimtzum Shechinasai, it means not there was a Tzimtzum, a Helen Behester, Chas v'Shalom. Ki im hu gilui elikus b'madrega gavaya v'nayla ma'oit. Extremely high level of gilui oir. V'lachein amru shemokam ha'orein einem in amida. Klal. It was a big miracle. We saw elikus in the Beis Hamikdash. You went into Kodesh HaKadoshim and you took a measuring stick and you measure the Arain. We know it's supposed to be a Amasayim V'Chetzi, 2.5 amas wide, and you measure it, and it's 2.5. Between the Arain on the right side and the wall is 5 amas. Between the Arain on the left and the wall is another 5 amas. How much is that? 10. So if you have 10 plus the Arain, how much is everything together? 12.5 amas. Then take the measuring stick and measure from wall to wall. You know what you get? 10 amas. What happened to the other 2.5? And it can't be make-believe, because according to the Ratzin Hashem, the Arin has to have 2.5 amas, the length of it, or the width, whatever you call it. From right to left, it had to have 2.5 amas. So where did it disappear to? That's Gili Elokus, to show who's in charge of this world. Who makes cheshbainis? The Eibishter. Let's look inside. The Aron, sorry, I said I'm Sayim V'Chetzi. I'm a Sayim Arka. It was 2 amas long. And the width was 1.5. It was very limited. Like the Eibishter said, the Aron should have 2 amas length. Did not take any place. The only reason why this was so, because in the Beis Hamikdash there was shining a great oil, an unbelievable amount of oil. This just to show that from Atzilus, not only it comes down to Bria, Yitzir Asir, it comes down to this world into a physical place, the Beis Hamikdash. Kamaimer ukamaimer plus Holman Israel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem has 3 worlds. Ukeneged zeh hoy bebeis Hamikdash gimel diyodim chulu. There were 3 places, 3 dwellings. Over Kodesh HaKadoshim, in Kodesh HaKadoshim hoy gili oirin seif bebechinas pnimius ve'atzmis ein seif Baruch Hu mamash. Ubederach klal bebeis Hamikdash heir bechinas gili elokus mamash. It was mamash gili elokus in the Beis Hamikdash. So we see that Rebbe is now summarizing, or let's summarize, bring out that the shtalshelus goes all the way from the top to the very bottom. And this is something like we have learned already in the past, that Atzmus Mahus Ein Seif Baruch Hu is here present with us. And therefore, all cheshbainis gashmias don't mean anything. We look at the world and we see what's going on, doesn't mean anything. We could raise ourselves higher. Raise ourselves higher by knowing that we're connecting to Hashem. I owe something that I said I'm going to mention earlier. It says, there's a famous vart that whoever has a chush for music has a chush in Chassidus. It's a vart from Rabbi Parachet. If you have a chush in Negina, you have a chush in Chassidus. Why? What's the connection? So I'm going to just say it in short. Maybe another time I'll elaborate, because it also has to do with the union of art and music. But there's not enough time for it today. Lena, if I don't forget next time. Nigun, if you ask a person who's singing a nigun, you just finished singing the nigun, why are you singing it again? He sings it again and again. And sometimes a person can get so carried away in the nigun, he forgets where he is, forgets about time limits. He just keeps on singing. A geschmack nigun. What's the pshat? Like the Rebbe said in the Maimer, it's something which is tainu gaseichel. You reach such a high level as a zingtzach that you naturally want to sing. Singing does so much for a person. And if you ask the person, why are you singing it again? And he'll answer, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm not here. I'm totally lost in the nigun. If a person has tainug from, let's say, you ate a good piece of cake, how much cake can you eat? I'm not going to go into that. But there comes a point where you say, I can't finish. You have a limit. So why nigun? You can go on and on and on and on. The answer is simple. Cake, or another type, you're taking it to yourself. So you're limiting it to your kalim. Nigun, you're going out into that nigun. You're getting lost in that nigun. You're singing that niggin, and you're like in a different world. That's where we find that Chassidim who daven long hours, they sing. They're going into a different world, stepping out of themselves and going into a new realm, a new world. And with this, we can explain why niggin is so, the chush of niggin is so connected to the chush of Chassidus. Chassidus is not just learning another maimer or understanding another sicha. Of course, that is also the iked inyan of Chassidus was to take one subject, one vart, and get lost in it. Be misbeinen in it. Think about it. Contemplate in it. Meditate on it. And picture that you're there. Like the Rebbe spoke, Chav Cheshvan Tavshem Mem Aleph, I mentioned it already once, that it's a good idea for a person to lock himself in the room once a day or at least once a week and to meditate, to picture that you're standing before Har Sinai. It will invigorate you, rejuvenate. I'm getting lost there. I'm not anymore in Brooklyn. I'm at Har Sinai right now. Of course, this is not something we could do overnight. It takes practice. But the Nakuda is to translate, to bring anything that we learn, to think about, even when we learn tonight, how much of it is really fully understanding. I'm talking about myself. Most of it is, if anything, it's Hasaga of Metzias. Mahus, forget about that we're not even talking about. But even Metzias, to get all of the technical details right and to understand it, hopefully we got it more or less right. But the iked is, was nennt man von them? Was nennt man von them? That from the highest level of Adam Kadmon, all the way down to Olam Hazeh, into this world, Elokus is shining, and Elokus, the Eibishter, is with us, and he's controlling everything. If we think for 1 second that anyone else besides Hashem is in control, and that my life is being controlled by any other powers, that's Chas v'Shalom saying that there is someone besides Hashem. What's about Einoid Muvadai? Every morning we wake up, Moida ani lefanecha melech, you're my king, you're everything. Whatever is happening, wherever I am, this is your design. And you perfectly designed it for me. Not just design, perfectly. This is the best for me. And we ask Hashem to give us toiv, hanira, v'anigla, that we should also see how perfect it is. I think it was the Badichev said, Hoidol Hashem ki toiv, praise Hashem ki lo'elam chastoi. But that's not enough. Yoimana Yisrael ki lo'elam chastoi. Yidden too, we should see that it's good and praise him for the good. We should have the best good. Take of me ad mamash. The Shechina soll nisgale werden. The Eibush, the Shechina who's in Galus with us, we should together with the Shechina go out of Galus. Should have the Binyan Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Karek Mamash.